biggest licensing coup in history, proclaimed a confident and optimistic Atari founder, Nolan Bushnell, in 1982. His pioneering video game company had just paid a record-shattering $22 million to secure the rights to make a game based on Steven Spielberg's E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. The blockbuster film had surpassed even Star Wars to become the highest-grossing movie of all time. Atari planned to ride this momentum and create a hit holiday gaming blockbuster tied to the cultural phenomenon of E.T. But the rushed development process would doom the game to being deemed an unplayable failure upon release. Yet over time, perceptions evolved and E.T. gained new life as a revered cult classic. What followed would become one of the most infamous failures in gaming history that transformed into an iconic comeback story. This is the inside story behind the E.T. video game that crashed and burned, then found redemption. Atari pioneered the earliest home and arcade video games like Pong, starting in 1972. Their 1977 video computer system, VCS, later named the Atari 2600, revolutionized gaming by using interchangeable cartridges. We were the innovators, the first to introduce cartridge-based video games and take arcade hits the mainstream, said Atari programmer Howard Scott Warshaw. Throughout the late 70s and early 80s, Atari singularly dominated the industry, commanding an astonishing 75–80% of the market share. Iconic arcade classics like Space Invaders, Asteroids and Centipede became national phenomenons when Atari brought them home. By 1982, video games had exploded into a $3 billion industry, with Atari leading the way. When Spielberg's sci-fi heartwarmer E.T. exceeded all box office expectations to become the #1 film of all time, Atari saw a major opportunity to capitalize on pop culture excitement. The E.T. license was theirs for $22 million. To hit shelves in time for the make-or-break 1982 holiday season, Atari gave programmer Howard Scott Warshaw just over 5 weeks to develop E.T. from concept to completion. It was literally a situation where I was building the engine of the plane while I was flying it, Warshaw recalled of the nightmarish development sprint. Without time for core gameplay refinement or consumer focus testing, Atari corporate rushed the unfinished E.T. game into full production. The hype quickly turned into scorn once E.T. landed in consumers' hands in late 1982. Critics called it mind-numbingly boring with unfocused gameplay, muddy graphics, and convoluted objectives. Others deemed it unplayable garbage. Rather than the magical adventure promised, players wandered aimlessly through screen after screen of pixelated scenery and obnoxious pits searching for scattered phone pieces to slowly assemble an interplanetary telephone. Atari projected sales of 5 million based on the popular E.T. brand name, but they were stunned when sales stalled around 1.5 million copies moved. Universal, who licensed the rights, deemed E.T. the worst video game in history. E.T.'s catastrophic failure left Atari sitting on millions of unsold cartridges they couldn't even give away for pennies. In 1983, Atari secretly buried tons of unsellable E.T. and other games in a landfill site in Alamogordo, New Mexico. The rampant overproduction of lackluster tie-in games like E.T. soon led to a chain reaction of retailers dumping games at rock-bottom prices to recoup any money. Shelves were saturated with poor-quality titles that went unsold. This shockwave led to the complete collapse of the once-booming American video game industry by 1985. What was once a $3 billion business cratered into a mere $100 million market, dominated by personal computers. E.T. is often cited as the tipping point in this devastating 1983 game industry crash. Yet over time, the E.T. legend took on new life in unexpected ways. As the years passed, the game earned admirers for just how bizarrely off the rails its game design was compared to Atari classics like Raiders of the Lost Ark. Angry video game reviewer reactions to E.T. on YouTube went viral, introducing new generations to the game fans' love to hate. E.T.'s utter awfulness made it an iconic case study for bad game design. Pop culture references appeared across shows like South Park, which featured E.T. in an episode titled Imagination Land, and films like Adam Sandler's Pixels. For gamers, E.T. had transformed from reviled failure to a revered cult classic. Rumors of the mass burial of E.T. cartridges in the New Mexico desert passed into video game lore. In 2014, excavation began at the landfill site to unearth a buried slice of gaming history. Over 700 pristine E.T. cartridges emerged from their 30-year entombment, along with thousands of other Atari games. E.T., once literally buried in the desert, had come full circle as a cultural touchstone. Museums gladly added the rescued carts to their video game history collections. While undoubtedly a cautionary tale of deadline-driven development, E.T.'s lasting infamy showed how pop culture can transform past failures into nostalgic success stories. E.T. taught the industry how branding and quality are not always aligned, said Warshaw, but I take pride that after all these years, it is still remembered. When Nintendo's NES revived the industry in 1985, the lessons of E.T. led to stricter development oversight. But E.T. also proved that even the worst failures can gain new life decades later as cult classics. Like its namesake Alien, the little-loved E.T. game found renewed purpose. As Atari's great crash and burn, E.T. serves as a genesis story for the entire industry, rising phoenix-like from the ashes. 40 years later, E.T. endures as the quintessential gaming letdown, yet also a parable of redemption. This infamous failure transformed against all odds into an iconic treasure. Now a landmark in gaming history, E.T. proved that sometimes the greatest cult classics are born of disaster and the most enduring legends begin as cautions. What was once deemed an unplayable mess had evolved into a retrospective masterpiece.